Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. This episode is part one of my interview with longtime tech at SAC Comedy Lab and fellow improviser Charlie Downs. I met Charlie either when I became a lab rat or once I was in what was called Gen S at the time. Charlie is amazing at what he does for many reasons, but I think the most important are he had amazing mentors, he knows what it's like to perform on stage, and he loves improv. The techs at SAC do more than the average lightboard op, which seems to be the norm at so many improv theaters. Is amazing tech a necessity? No, you can do improv without it, but when you have someone like Charlie Downs in the booth, you feel supported on a whole other level, and it allows you to take risks and make choices that you couldn't do otherwise. Techs like Charlie can support your choices, save a floundering scene, and propel your scene forward. In order for any of that to happen, the actors have to trust the tech and play with the tech like they would any other improviser on stage. If you don't have a Charlie in your theater, you're missing out. Improv theaters who harness their technical abilities are unfortunately rare, and techs like Charlie are a huge asset. If you run a theater, find a Charlie Downs. Don't know what you're looking for just yet? Find out as you listen to part one of Charlie Downs' Improv Autopsy. Thank you, Charlie, for joining me on Improv Autopsy.
Of course. It's great to see you. It's going to be a little bit somber, but I realized that the last time I think I saw / talked to you was when we did that celebration for Christian after he passed in 2020.
Yeah.
And I actually thought about saying that because I wanted to bring up the fact that, like, during that moment, all the people were talking, and I found out, and like, I hadn't been consciously aware of how much of a family we had actually been for certain people, especially Christian. And like, we were, I think, one of his like first friend groups as like an adult. And we were the group I think he came out to first. And it was so interesting to hear how much of an effect the group had and how much positive effect it had on him, because he's also responsible for things like the job I have is because of Christian, for, you know, going, hey, look at this guy. And so it was so heartwarming to hear that. And then to hear you and Rob talk about 6 Degrees in that way also has just been very eye-opening and very, very sweet and like the best kind of nostalgia, you know?
Yeah.
And so I know your podcast is about improv and all that stuff. And I just realized how much a lot of us, the family we had in our 20s and early 30s, was the improv that we were doing and the groups we were doing it with.
Yeah. Well, and that's been one of the things I think has been encouraging and amazing about talking to all these people that predated me at SAC.
Yeah.
And that you hear Benji talk about and other people that have been sort of in the ether the entire time I was there, in terms of these are the people that came before, these are the people that you've heard of, and just how much of a family it still is.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Were you around for the Fool Fests?
No, that was before me.
Oh, yeah. No, it was cool. I think Jay Hopkins was sort of like the leader of it. SAC did an improv festival for, I think, like 3 years. And it was so neat because we would bring all of these great people in, and I can't even tell you specific ones, but I want to say like TJ was there at one point, and I think maybe Stacked, but that might have come later. But the whole awesome part was all of these people from across the country came to SAC, and at the time we were doing it, SAC was like one of the only theaters in the country that had its own space, that paid its actors, and that did improv like 5 nights a week. And people were blown away by just that concept.
Yeah.
And I thought it was such a great way to like introduce SAC to other people, get SAC on the like map as like an improv hotspot. And I really wish we could find a way to do them again, because, it was so neat to see everybody, but then also to have them sort of see us.
Yeah.
And see like, oh, there's something happening in Orlando. It's not just theme parks.
Yeah. 2 of those things I think are still true, right? Still one of the only theaters to pay actors, improv theaters that pays actors.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we're still paying actors. I don't know what the other side of it. Yeah, we haven't gone the other direction.
And that feeling, Greg and I had talked about that before even moving to Chicago. Like, one of the goals was to highlight just the amount of talent that there is in Orlando, and there's just the great scene that's going on down there, because, you know, Chicago, LA, New York get all of the attention in terms of improv.
Yeah.
Because they've got the big names and whatever that come out of there. But it's surprising how many people have come out of SAC. It's a cool place. But you didn't start at SAC, did you? What was your first encounter with improv? Do you remember?
Yeah, I can remember a few improv bumps in the road, not negative, but positive ones. I feel like in sixth grade or middle school or something, we did some kind of acting unit in an English class or something. And at one point, we learned just a tad about the concept of improv. And then we had to like improvise a fairy tale and retell it with a cast, kind of. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I went to Carnegie Mellon for a little bit. That's where I started my college career. And I remember going with some friends to a local, I think they called it the Pit, not the one in New York, but like I think they called it the Pit. And it was an improv. And it actually, the stage was like, it was a theater in the round, but they also were stadium seating. So it really was kind of a pit, I think. And that was the first improv I saw. And I remember actually getting to go on stage because they called people up and they did World's Worst or something like that. And then just had us do stuff. Oh, and then a friend of mine, Donovan Tate, started an improv show at Carnegie Mellon and was in it. And I went to several of those shows. I never tried it, but I went to his shows and he was amazing. But he's also one of those people who's like so amazing at one thing and then probably didn't go into it. Like you ever, in high school, you'd always be like, oh, that person could play the flute the best. And they were first chair in states. And you're like, what are you going to college for? It's clearly music, right? And they're like, no, I'm going for like business or his. And you're just like, and your mind's blown. And when you get to college, you're like, okay, yeah, not everybody who is first in states can be a flautist, but like, you're just like, how is that not the thing you're going to do for the rest of your life? And I feel like he went on to be like a salesman or something crazy like that and might do it in the past. I looked him up like once and it was just like, he wasn't like in Chicago doing improv or something. And he's just so good at other things too, that he was just like, yeah, and improv. Yeah, whatever. So I did that, and then I took a semester off because Carnegie Mellon was expensive, and I wasn't doing great. So I was like, okay, it's too expensive to like go here. I'll try another school, but I'm going to take a semester off. And at that point, my parents had moved to Ohio, so I was sort of stuck in this city that I didn't go to high school in. So it was kind of like this weird abyss that I didn't know anybody from and stuff. It was kind of a sucky time, but I ended up really watching a lot of Quick Wits. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, because that came on after Saturday Night Live. And I was in a place where I was staying up till 3 a.m. And I now know that Dave Russell was on a couple of those episodes.
Yeah.
I remember watching it. And of course, it's even more than like Whose Line Is, which is even more than like some of the Dropout seems to be. But like it was not much improv. A lot of it was actually like they did a lot of work beforehand kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still like it came off as improv. Those were the three major moments for me for improv, but I wasn't involved with almost any of that.
But that was your inroad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, made you first aware of it. It's so funny to me that you brought up Quick Wits. Wayne was on it. Dave was on it. Dave Rosowski was a part of it. And all these people that were part of this show that went through so many, like, I was like, it was like, what, one season? No, it was like 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah, something like that.
It changed a little bit. Like they changed the intro and they changed hosts and different things. And they were really trying for something. It was kind of a hot mess, but you're the first person I've talked to that was like, oh yeah, I watched that.
Yeah. I think it came up and Dave Russell was like, oh yeah, I'm in that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So it's interesting. It's one of those sort of moments of like, hey, visibility kind of thing. Anytime anything from anything is shown on TV, there's somebody out there watching it and it exposes them for that. So like,
yeah,
it's awesome.
So that was the seed being planted and watered a little bit. So what was your first experience then with improv? Did you experience a class or performing first, or were you brought into the technical side of things first?
Oh, no, it was definitely classes. I was at UCF because after Carnegie Mellon, I went to UCF, which was significantly cheaper and a little easier too. You know, I never really was good at like learning things. I was just naturally smart in a way that probably is a detriment to me in my adult life. But as a kid, I just picked stuff up. Like I don't even know where it came from. I would just know that that's the right answer kind of thing. So I did real well in school, but I never learned how to like sit down with a book and just read it and learn things. And anyways, that's a bigger issue for Charlie. But I was in Carnegie Mellon and I had some friends, and one of my friends was Sandy, and she was in a fraternity that was like a service fraternity. I think it's like Alpha Phi Omega. And one of the other people in that fraternity was Matt Cross. And so Matt Cross, and I think the group as a whole, used to volunteer for Fringe back when Fringe was downtown. One year they were doing that, and so I went along with them, and I wasn't in the fraternity, but I was friends with them, and I was like, hey, a Fringe festival. I had actually gone to Edinburgh with my high school back my senior year.
Wow.
Because we were part of this. I'm still not sure if it was a scam or not, but apparently there was a company and they had bought like spots in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And then they held this year-long competition for like high schools in America to compete for 10 of those spots. And my high school, Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland, ended up being one of those places. Now, the reason I say I don't know if it's a scam is because we still had to like completely pay our way there. It wasn't like it was free or anything. And so by the end, it ended up probably being like, well, these are the 10 high schools that aren't horrible and have found a way to pay it off. So it's not really a true competition. There are variables, right? But we ended up going and it was great and I loved it and saw so many crazy things. And it was right between high school and college. So it was the first time I was a little bit without parents and without supervision. So we actually did have a little bit of like, we went and saw a couple of crazy shows that you never saw. I remember USC. I think that's the one. Wherever George Lucas went to, they did the trilogy in 90 minutes or less or something. And I think it was one of the first times something like that had happened. And it was just 5 people and they just ran around on stage. They had like 2 giant boxes that they jumped on. And like Darth Vader had a cape, but then he would flip it around and it would be furry and he was Chewbacca. And it was just so chaotic and fun. And it was something that those shows feel like almost improv a little bit. Like they've got that vibe, the like energy of an improv show. So we saw all that. So I was like, well, Fringe is awesome. So Orlando's got one. Let me help volunteer. So we volunteered for that. And then at the volunteer party for Fringe, one of the things that you could bid on or like put your Fringe bucks into was a class at SAC. And so me and Sandy both put like all of our stuff in that. But then Matt Cross comes in and Matt Cross was so nice. He volunteered as basically security and ran security for like the entire Fringe. So he had an infinite amount of Fringe bucks basically. And so he put that in. And so like he totally won. What totally like at the moment you're like, oh, but like totally like after you know what he had done for Fringe, you're like, yeah, no, you deserve it. You totally deserve it. And of course he's such a nice guy that you're just like, yeah, come on. But because of that, Sandy and I started volunteering at SAC. And in fact, volunteered at SAC enough that by the time the next rotation of classes came in, we both took the classes for free with SAC bucks, and so did Matt. And so that was a whole thing that we did. And then we took that level 1 and it was amazing. And then it's interesting. That level 1 class was very interesting because it was Sandy who was like, this is my big fling in the summer because I start my junior year as an engineer. And that means I'm doing nothing else fun for the next 2 years. It was 2 people that felt super old, but then of course I was in my 20s. So of course that could just mean they were like 50, but they were like, I think they were probably in their 60s and they were such a cute couple. They were like, every summer we do something. And then that's what we do for that summer. And then we go to another experience next year. And so the 2 of them had decided to take these 8 weeks of classes together and they were great. And then we never saw them again. But they were there to enjoy and learn and have fun. I want to say Nadia was also one of the people in my class. So that's where I started. I volunteered and worked my way up the volunteer. And then one day the cashier isn't there for the concession stand. So you get to do that and earn double SAC bucks. And then one day the real cashier isn't there. So you get to do that. And you do that enough times that sooner or later you ended up on the weekend cashiering and getting actual money for it. And then sometimes the stage manager calls in. And so suddenly now you're like assistant stage manager and helping run the show. And I only did that once or twice, but I was like on the list of like, hey, if it really, really gets down to the bottom, Charlie could probably get us through the night without the place on fire. And so I did that, but then I was also taking classes and I was enjoying classes, and I met a lot of people in the classes that end up being friends for a long time. But I had a background in tech. In high school, my band teacher, and I realized it was my band teacher that got me started, was like, hey, you're okay with the drums and the string bass, but I think you'd like to be behind the soundboard of the jazz band. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, my girlfriend at the time was in the jazz band, so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And that's where I first touched a soundboard. And then when I was in college, I started doing some sound stuff at Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon was at the time one of the few schools that had an undergraduate degree for directors. But part of that degree was they had to take a class in lighting, a class in sound, stage management. Like there was all these like little things, which is brilliant, like and good for them. And it was amazing. My last semester there, I was an engineer, but I snuck into the like drama department to take that sound class because they were like, well, there's only like 6 people in this class, and sure, why not? So I got it. It was definitely the class I did the best in my entire 3 semesters at Carnegie Mellon. But it was taught by this guy who had done sound for movies, but he was also theater sound. And we learned the basics of sound. And then at one point we even had to create sound slash not score, but like get everything together and do all the sound work. Because they had this undergraduate director's degree, all the people in it needed to constantly be putting on little plays. And so they'd put little plays on like in the hallway at midnight of the theater building, or on the campus field at noon when they did Macbeth or something, like fun little like experiments, but just to get the repetitions in for a director. And so we were able to be paired up with a director. And so the director met with me and he was like, we're going to do this thing. And I want these sound effects. I actually remember the name of the show was Etta Jenks. And it's a show that is basically the same thing as Boogie Nights, where it's about this girl who goes to Hollywood and then becomes a porn star or something. So I got a whole bunch of like cool 70s music for the background and stuff. And then also I went and I specifically had to go into town. I took a bus to like a Sam Goodies to get something called Sexorama, which was like classic scores from porn. That was like just a compilation because they did all sorts of crazy compilations. So I brought that back so we would have something that sounded a little bit more porny for certain parts of the show. And it was a great experience. But then I went to UCF and I was a radio television major, but I was in the like news kind of thing, but I always did everything backstage. So, you know, I was doing video editing and I was doing sound editing and stuff. I was like, I don't really want to be on camera. But that's how I got sound. And then I was taking classes and then I was like, I want to be in that booth because that's where I feel a lot more comfortable and I know what I'm doing. And then I think one of maybe 2 or 3 times in the entire history of SAC did a tech class.
Wow.
It ended up that I must have just missed the previous one because I think Steve Pratt was in the previous one. So he was like right in front of me in the line of techs. I know Adam Bellis was in it, and I know Matt Cross was, and I know Sarah Justice was. I think Shannon might have been in that. And it was just a class where John Valinas told us the ins and outs. And this is back when we're still using CDs to play some music and play the intro off of CDs. And we just did an 8-week class where we learned all that stuff. And then we started doing lab rats and Wednesday night shows for free at the time with that class. And so all of those people were techs for a moment. And then most of them ended up doing other stuff and acting or going on and doing other stuff. But Matt and I stayed at it and we became like the backup techs. And then that's just where that grew.
Now, before you went to Edinburgh,
yeah,
you were in band in high school. Did you do theater in high school?
Yeah, I did theater. I don't know if it's a regret, but it's one of those weird things where knowing what I do now, it's weird that I was so into the like, I was doing all the stuff on stage, but I was never in a stagecraft class, so I never did that kind of stuff. The only thing I did with that was like when they had the entire cast come in for the weekend because we're like putting flats up and we like all have to get together to do that. They also brought in this couple that would do sound for the show. And I'm like, how did I not try to join that somehow? Or the lighting or something like that. I was so, even though I wasn't great, I was the rabbi in Fiddler on the Roof. And I was like the least Jewish kid in the entire cast. But they were just like, oh, old person, Charlie can play that. I don't know why I was in the acting, but then stagecraft just didn't hit me at that time. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I look back and I'm like, if I had been able to do that, I might have had like a leg up and actual learning. Because everything I've learned from tech has felt like it's been like on the job training / last minute things. And it would have been so nice to have a little bit more of a specific curriculum for that kind of stuff. Which I guess Valinus did for us when we took that class. I guess that is the one class that I've taken in teching that was like actually a tech class.
Yeah. And then, like you said, the on-the-job stuff from jazz band.
Yeah.
Does it sound like there was a whole lot of opportunity, though, for that? If they're bringing other people in, it's not like they had student apprentices doing any of that or working with the sound people in high school.
Sound-wise, yes, but I should have taken a stagecraft class, and I didn't. My senior year, I aided for theater, but didn't take the stage class. And maybe some of that was, we had a really weird schedule at our school where we only had like 7 periods. But on Mondays and Thursdays, if you took classes the rest of the week, well, most of the classes I took also had study days in some of those classes. So on Monday and Thursday were days when you could take sectionals for choir. So I was in choir, and that's when you could take sectionals for band and all the like arts and stuff that were like 2 days a week. I even took Latin 2 days a week at one point so that at that point you're taking almost 14 classes instead of just 7. And so it was just probably a matter of whatever class I needed to actually graduate always probably was at the same time as stagecraft.
Yeah.
And so it never lined up for me.
So was it the theater program or theater class that got connected with the Edinburgh thing?
Yes. Well, it was the show. My superpower is just being places for a long period of time. Until somebody decides that, oh, Charlie's always been here. He must know what he's doing. My senior year, I ended up being elected vice president of the theater group, the Thespians, right? We put on a show every year. And so somehow our teacher had heard about this thing. And so the fall show ended up being a play. It was called Smile. There was a movie in the 70s about it. And it's basically about a beauty pageant, but like all the ugliness underneath the prettiness of the beauty pageant.
Okay.
It's sort of the looking at America at that time and being like, oh, look how pretty it is on the outside, but here's all this ugly stuff underneath it, right? That was the thing that my teacher really wanted to take to Edinburgh as like a political statement. And so that was the play that was chosen. And we sort of auditioned with that by just having the people come and watch our show when we did our show normally. And then we started personal fundraising kind of stuff. We were selling pasta and all those things you do as a kid, right? Which I had done for years as a Boy Scout, so I was used to it. But then it whittled it down, and every couple of months it would be like, well, now it's these 20 schools, and now it's these 15 schools. And then we ended up just being, and now we're doing it. So I actually ended up flying over to Edinburgh, London, went to Edinburgh, did the show. The train to Edinburgh from London was amazing because it was literally 5 cars of 10 different high schools from across the country of all these teenagers talking to each other. I made friends with all these people from Hawaii. It was so much fun. And then we did the shows, and then I came back, and I literally got off the plane from Edinburgh, got into my parents' car, and they drove me to Pittsburgh because that's when school started for me, or at least orientation day.
Quite the whirlwind.
Yeah.
But also quite the send-off.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. Edinburgh, I mean, like, this isn't a podcast about Fringe, but that was just so cool to see all that stuff, especially 30 years ago, like those kind of festivals didn't really happen like that if they weren't music. And just to know that this place, like we were performing in like some elementary school in Edinburgh where there was less than a foot off stage behind curtains and just running around trying to make that work. Just was crazy. But like to know that there were like 1,000 other people doing the exact same thing all over Edinburgh was it was crazy. It was amazing. And then having that freedom and then going to college and suddenly being like, oh, here's that freedom I knew. And that might have been a little problem for me too. But yeah, it was such a big transition from like being in high school to college. And that was either a great starting point or a very interesting middle ground between the two of those.
Do you know if that program still exists that takes American high schoolers over there?
Oh, I think it was a one-time thing.
Oh, okay.
It didn't 100% sound like a scam, but if you had said it now, it definitely would sound like a scam. I don't think we particularly paid any more money than we would have needed to go to Scotland. So it's not like they were like charging us $5,000 for like $1,000 plane trip or something like that. I think a lot of that stuff was even on our end. So like I said, I don't think it was a scam, but it definitely seemed just shady enough that I don't even think they did it again. They were just like, oh, that was fun. That was interesting. Okay.
Well, that could be an indication that it wasn't a scam because they didn't make any money off it, so it was not worth doing again.
That is true. It must have been a lot of work. I'm not entirely sure how you reserve a spot in the Edinburgh Fringe. I mean, it's probably just find a place that's willing to give you some time and like put down money, kind of. It's not like Orlando's where you have to get into a lottery and win the lottery. So either that was really difficult or really easy. And then I could see a person who would love having that job. I just don't know a company that would make sense for, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so fast forward back to when you're putting your fringe bucks, which they don't do anymore, do they? Or do they?
No, I don't think they do. SAC has slowly transitioned to being more of like a company, and in for the most part, the better ways, making a little bit more money, increasing paychecks a little bit, starting to pay front of house an actual minimum wage, actually having staff that is front of house as opposed to random volunteers that would show up once in a while. They definitely have made their way to being a more professional theater over the last 25 years.
And fringe bucks though too. You said you had fringe bucks or whatever, right?
Yeah, those don't really. Oh, and I guess they kind of exist now. It's been a while since I've volunteered, but fringe bucks were things that like you did enough shifts, you got some fringe bucks. Certain shows would allow you in for a fringe buck, like they do comps, or sometimes shows will have rushes. Sometimes we have a year where if you have a artist badge, you can rush a show if it's within the last 2 minutes of the show and they haven't sold out, kind of thing. So you could use those. And then I'm sure they have after parties and stuff like they used to. It's been a while since I've volunteered for them.
The SAC classes I took were also using SAC bucks. That's how I paid for that. I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise because I was in school and the job that I had wasn't going to pay enough to be able to do that. So I'm glad they did.
100%.
Hopefully there's scholarships or something still going on.
Yeah, I don't think they use volunteers up front anymore either. So I don't know. But I know that they have worked on scholarships and things like that, especially to create more diversity and stuff within the cast. So I'm sure there are ways you can do that for relatively cheap. But yeah, the only class I ever paid for was that tech class because for some reason they didn't take SAC bucks at the time. And I've more than made up for the money that I spent for that. So that's good.
Had you been to a SAC show or was SAC on your radar before you tried to get the free class via Fringe?
I lived with this dude and he was in 6 Degrees at one point, Jamie Barwick. And at one point, he and his girlfriend, who was also my friend, another Jamie, had taken me. They were like, get in this car. We're going to somewhere. You're going to really enjoy it. And I'm like, okay. And so we pulled up into this parking garage and we went to this red door, this red-orange door, and then realized it was Monday. And so it was closed. And so they were like, oh, we were taking you someplace cool, but it's Monday and it doesn't count. So we turned around and maybe it was like a summer or something. Like, I don't know what inspired them for that moment to do that. So we left. And it was like a year later that I started at SAC. And it was like 3 years later that I realized that was the door that they had taken me to. And it was Monday, so it was closed. It's so weird that I almost started SAC a year earlier, and that would have been cool. I mean, one, it might have put me in front of Steve Pratt, so it might have helped a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's neat that my friends were both like, I think this is a place you'd like. And I was like, okay. And then it just didn't work. And then I ended up at that place anyways.
Yeah. They were right, and they just never tried again.
Yeah.
That would have been to see a show, though, right?
That would have been to see a show.
Had you seen a show before you were like, hey, improv, I'll try to take the class?
I mean, kind of, because Sandy had also at one point traded somebody 10 Fringe bucks for 10 SAC bucks. Not entirely sure why. I also think that Fringe was at SAC that year. It's several times sure. Fringe. So I think at one point we volunteered outside of SAC. So we kind of had a sense of the building. And because we had the SAC bucks and everything, I think we just started the first time as volunteers. But then as volunteers, you watch the show. And I think several people have talked about the volunteer thing is really nice because you just get repetitions of watching shows and you know games. And now when people learn in like level 2, you go, we're going to play this game. And people are like, what is that? But when we were watching a million shows because we were volunteering all the time, you're like, oh, I know that show. I even have been able to pick up on a couple of those tools they talk about putting in your tool belt just from watching 100 of those.
Yeah.
So it was very beneficial to have volunteered beforehand because I got to see all of those shows because you're just watching shows the whole time and then and
Yeah.
being familiar with all of that stuff and then going into class and being like, oh, this is that and this is that. Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, so you start taking the classes, and the tech class came while you were in one of the levels, while you were still going through the 4 levels that were there, or was that
It was somewhere, I think. I mean, I also took level 4 3 times, but Shannon was in it. So if Shannon was in it, it must have been like a year or two later after classes and after I'd been in lab rats for a little bit. We took that
okay?
official class. Yeah.
And when did 6 Degrees happen? And did you have any other performance groups other than 6 Degrees?
I never really had any other performance groups other than 6 Degrees. And then 6 Degrees, because I'm not one of the original 6 Degreeers. 6 Degrees had an iteration where they were doing stuff in living rooms like 6 Degrees had started, but I wasn't part of that because that was also sort of like the generation above me, if that makes any sense. Simon and Adam, and I think like Francisco and a whole bunch of other people. And then at one point, after being in lab rats for 2 or 3 years, I think 6 Degrees started. And then it went from there. And 6 Degrees has really been the only improv group I was part of. And that's why like it was so neat to hear people talk about Christian and how much he loved the group as a starting place for his coming out of his shell and just being more social. I guess I didn't realize that 6 Degrees came before Offsides.
Oh, yeah.
It was so nice to hear that kind of, because there was so much tumultuosity with 6 Degrees, especially when it came to SAC. I mean, there are multiple times that it was weird, but the earliest one was when SAC started being angry that we were doing 6 Degrees. There was a moment where they were like, we know you can't stop you from doing this, but we don't like you going out and doing this alternate improv at other places. And I feel like they thought it was a threat to their business model or something. And it was just so weird because it's exactly what every teacher had usually said was the way to get better at improv was to
Yeah.
find a group and perform.
Yeah.
And yet we were doing that and we were never amazingly successful, but we were doing a couple of gigs. We would pick up a couple of, SAC wasn't going to go to an elementary school teachers meeting for like $300 and do a show, but we would because it was great and it was fun. And then those teachers were really handsy, but But SAC came at us in a way that was this slow murmur of like, well, you really shouldn't be doing that. And like, I'm afraid you're going to be like taking our gigs. And I'm like, it was just one of those things where the gigs we are doing are not the gigs you want to do
Right.
for the money that they are offering us.
Yeah.
And there was this weird thing. And looking back, I want to say that us doing that helped at least make it a little less bad for other people who tried to do it later. Because for some reason, when we started, there was this air that you shouldn't be doing that from above us. But yet the teachers, I felt, were saying that's exactly what you should be doing if you want to learn improv.
Yeah.
That was just the beginning of the ups and downs between SAC and 6 Degrees. It's so weird how much, not animosity, but like just conflict and stuff between the two groups. It's so strange that happened.
Yeah.
Especially considering who was part of 6 Degrees with Gina in the office and Rob as their manager. And yet still somehow there's this chaotic, it's so strange to think back and look at that and stuff. But my hope is that at some point we at least made it so it was easier for other groups to start forming and have SAC not look at them as bad or competition.
And there are so many good reasons for a group like 6 Degrees to exist. And you forgot you in the booth because you were teching it by that point as well, right? So,
oh yeah. And I was teching. So yeah. So like a third of the group was actively being on the payroll of SAC.
yeah.
And so there was still this like weird pushback. And it was just,
And at the time, SAC wasn't paying all of your bills, so that was a labor of love. You were getting a little bit of money as tech, and Rob and Gina were getting paid, but I don't know if it was a living wage even for them. So a lot of that was a labor of love. But Offsides got some of that flack as well.
Yeah. Okay. So at least it wasn't just us, but
Yeah.
hopefully we eased it a little bit for you guys.
Well, I wasn't aware of all of this until later, but there was someone whose name I forget partially, but that's okay. I won't call him out, but got in touch with us and was like, hey, my company would like to do a thing. What would you charge? And we were like, okay. So we thought about it and we gave him a number and then didn't hear from him. And eventually I found out that SAC did the gig and I was upset, not at SAC. I was upset at the guy because what he did was he pit us against them to get, and then Sack undercut us. They had to have undercut the price we gave, which I thought was hysterical because I was like, there's no way
There's no way. Yeah.
that they would have done that gig for the price that we gave them. And so I thought it was hysterical that Sack took the gig. But I was like, whatever, no ill will there. But I thought it was bogus for that guy to pit us against each other just to get Sack to lower their price, I'm sure is what he did. He really wanted Sack.
Maybe Sack didn't undercut. Maybe Sack just lowered it just a little bit more because of that.
That's true.
And then he was like, okay, well, now that it's this number, which was probably still twice what you offered.
Yeah, I hope for whoever did the gig that's what happened, because otherwise they were getting a pittance compared to what they normally would have got. But it was that was funny. And the thing I think was great about 6 Degrees is I love the duel and I love the atmosphere of Sack. I mean, I love Sack. So this is one of those things where it's like some of the things that I would say I wouldn't let other people say that weren't part of that family, because hey, it's my family and I can talk.
Oh, I totally understand. Same. I'm in the exact same boat.
Okay. So the show at Sack is a certain type of show and it's done a certain way. And I don't typically go blue, so I don't have any issue with that. Some of the players in 6 Degrees like to go that way a little bit more than what you would be expected to do at SAC.
Yeah.
So I feel like 6 Degrees, even in just as an outlet to do that type of improv.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a different product, it's both improv, but it's a different product than what SAC delivers. So why not, have a space? And then they're going to be better improvisers at SAC because they're getting that out of their system somewhere else.
Yeah, I know. It was a weird, crazy time. And I think we managed to walk that path at that moment pretty well. But yeah, it was a little strange and a little weird that you're just, why are you pushing back so hard at this? We're not going to take over. Don't worry. We're not going to set up shop at the arena next to you and suddenly be selling out huge crowds and nobody's going to come to SAC anymore. It's just, and when anybody asks us where we learned it, we all go, SAC, go take classes.
Yeah. It's like the Orlando Magic being like, sorry, UCF, you can't play basketball anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
We do the basketball in this town. Well, but come on, there's room. That's hysterical for me to hear that. But I know exactly what you're talking about. So how did you get connected to 6 Degrees then? If you weren't one of the founders, was it someone that went through classes with you, or just in Lab Rats? It was like, hey, Charlie, come join us.
I think it was Lab Rats. I mean, it was probably Sydney, actually, because I volunteered with Sydney a lot.
Yeah.
And so she was a good friend. And so she started dating Simon, and Simon was part of it. I was also friends with Adam, I think had ended up going through most of the classes with me, give or take. And so it was just tangentially related to them. So it was one of those things where Charlie isn't necessarily the first guy we want over here. But after a year, it was like, okay, well, this person dropped out, so maybe we'll take Charlie. And so I just started practicing with them. I can also clear up a little bit. 6 Degrees 100% was named after the format that Simon had created. And the format, you got a little bit of it from Rob, I think, which was all 6 of us were on stage with our backs to the audience. One by one, we would randomly turn around and just speak a couple sentences of our character that we were. The audience would then put us in an order, 1 through 6. And then the first 6 scenes of the show, or I guess technically 5, were 1 and 2 together, and they established how they knew each other. And then 2 and 3 were together, and they established how they knew each other, all the way down the line. And then the fun of the show was almost a little bit like a puzzle, because the concept was, how can we make it so that based on the connections of everybody, we get 1 in the same room as 6? And work our way through. So it was like, well, this is my daughter, and today she's going to introduce me to her teacher, and then the teacher is going to introduce me. And then that was just the improvisation of scenes where you were in scenes with people that you originally had relationships with, but then found other people, and then now you were there. And so it was like this weird leapfrog kind of thing where the goal was to try to put the thing together, but it was also a fun, I know at one point we had somebody be like the color blue or something like that. And so some of our characters were really crazy, but just the puzzle of trying to figure out how would these people's lives, living their lives, make it so these two people meet. And it was clearly based on the Kevin Bacon concept.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me as well as LaRonde, but LaRonde is just circumstantial, right? You just see and you never revisit.
Yeah.
So if it were 6 people in LaRonde, when you get to 5 and 6, 6 leaves and enters a scene with 1 But that's just the way that it's set up. Whereas 6 Degrees would be, no, we're putting all this out there, and the challenge is to get these people together.
Yeah.
We're not just going to do it as part of the form.
It was always purposeful. The meetings had to be purposeful, or like,
Right,
it wasn't
right.
like, oh, and then you walk by this person on the sidewalk. It was, oh, I'm having a problem with my homework, and now my teacher has to meet my mom because she's come in because I've been doing so bad at school, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it was a very purposeful, seems like the best word to use. It's like,
Yeah.
there was a reason these two people are meeting, and a reason these two people are meeting, and then having enough of a relationship that they can be introduced to another person that the other person knows somehow. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. And it was one of those things where, when it worked, it was amazing. And then when it didn't work, it was just a lot of fun character work.
Yeah.
That people put together. And that was also fun. But like I think you've said with, maybe it was Transit, you were like, the best ones were done in practice.
Yes.
And when you were on stage, they never quite hit the way that some of those practice ones did.
Yeah, and we gave up on that. But I don't feel like when I was in 6 Degrees, we ever did 6 Degrees, unless there was one that I saw, which may have happened. But I came in, I think the gig at Austin's was already regular.
Yeah, we stopped about like a year into Austin's doing that, and then tried other long form-ish stuff, just sort of nothing concrete, but more of a like, hey, we'll take this word and run around with it for a little bit and see what happens. Because the concept was we did some short form in the first half, and then the thing that I always liked and pushed for was then we came back from intermission and we did a categories. And for me, the categories was important because it meant that all 6 of us were hearing the exact same words for the 5 minutes. And I always felt like that was a good stepping off point for all of us being in the same place. Not that we hadn't just played half a show together, but to me, it was just hearing those same words all at the same time meant that we were in very similar places. At least I like to think we were.
Yeah.
And then we would do the show, and then maybe we'd end it with something else. We also took, was it Mission Improbable? Somebody who did the where you're telling a story.
Challenge,
but it was originally called something else.
Oh, okay.
And then we just changed the name to just feel like we weren't completely stealing it. But that was another thing that we then ended up having so much fun with. And some of that was Rob's hosting, because Rob seemed to do the coolest things with the host. Like, oh, that sucks so bad. You got to stand in the back of the Austin's coffee shop for 5 minutes.
Yes.
And then you could come back. Or like we took that game and added layers to it that just made so much fun. And at that time, like we had an audience response. I think Rob talked about having the clap, the 6 degrees to end scenes. And the way that happened is instead of waving your arms, somebody off the side of the stage would jump on, like very obviously jump on. Usually it was the host. The clap was to go, oh, this is the end of the scene. And then we all went 6 degrees. And then the audience went, what the hell? And of course the audience was there. I believe, because she's going to yell about it. No, James Dillman, I think, takes credit for the what the hell.
Okay.
For the first time saying that, because she hadn't seen it before. And she literally was just like, what the hell?
Yes.
And then that became the response. And we had a group that was cool enough that when we did things like challenged and we sent them to the back of the room, like they were all in on it. Like they were loving every moment of it. And it was a lot of fun.
And those little moments are important, I think, for shape of show kind of thing, especially in a place like Austin's where it's like, we can't do a blackout.
No,
it's
not
a coffee
at all.
shop.
Not at all. Not at all.
To have something, some sort of, indication and something that to bring the audience along, and the interaction is also great to get the call and response kind of thing to keep everybody on board.
Yeah.
Is good stuff.
Well, and like Rob said, we definitely were like, we need something. We need to figure out what we're doing. And then that thing just sort of happened.
So 6 Degrees is the only external group then that you were in.
Yeah.
So you started teching and then you eventually got to be the Charlie Downs that we know and love today. You're still teching at SAC?
Yes, once in a while. In fact, I'm teching tonight. Like I said, we were doing lab rats. And then because we were just out of the tech class, so we were doing the class show. And we were doing that for a little bit. And then I happened to be on a Wednesday night as a volunteer one night when the tech wasn't there. And so I teched that show. And then the next week it happened again. And so I teched that show. And then suddenly I was the Wednesday night tech. I think Matt Cross thinks I took it from him, but I was like, no, I just happened to be there and the tech didn't show up 2 weeks in a row. And so then suddenly I became the Wednesday night tech. And then we went through a whole thing with being paid and stuff. And it was actually really kind of cool of David Russell because he like sort of auditioned us for like a weekend tech sort of thing. And Matt and I came in with such stacked resumes for what we were doing that I think that was almost the time that we started getting Tuesday and Wednesday people paid also, because he realized that we had a history and a, like, you know what I mean? Like we came informed. We weren't just like learning it by that time.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then you work into the Volinas was there for a long time. Then Pratt was there for a while. And then just life happens. And then I end up on the weekends. And I have to confess that I think one of the things that has really helped me have the reputation that I have is all of the people who grew up with me as the tech. Because there definitely is a perception in the booth that if Charlie's doing something, it's for a purpose. So even when I accidentally do something, people on stage are like, oh, there must be a reason Charlie is doing it, and plays with it. And it's like any other ensemble. When I first started doing weekend shows, and even the tiniest little thing, you could definitely tell in the eyes of the ensemble that they were like, oh, what is this guy doing? He's not John Volinas. But like I said, my superpower is being there for a long time. Once the ensemble of 4 basically left, I was the tech that they all knew. And so, I mean, it's sad to admit, but I think a lot of the love that people have for me is because they've grown up with me. And so they just automatically assume everything I'm doing is brilliant. So it's hard for other techs to do stuff because they're like, well, I don't know if Charlie would have done that. And it is. It's interesting to see how much of an influence growing up under somebody as a tech is versus getting a new tech out of nowhere.
Well, I think you have other superpowers, but I would also say that a huge lesson that anyone could take away from this or learn is that if you go into a scene believing that your scene partner is brilliant, the way that people at SAC believe that Charlie is brilliant, and that, oh, well, it must have been for a reason, so I'm going to roll with it. If you do that in a scene, it's going to be a great scene.
Oh, 100%.
If you're skeptical of what you're getting from the booth, if you're skeptical about what you're getting from your scene partner, it's not going to serve you.
Oh, of course. And that's the lesson of improv. You know what I mean? Like it of course, 100%.
Yeah.
It applies to your scene partners. It applies to, I mean, like everything, like just coming into the theater. If you're like skeptical of the night, then it's going to be a lot harder to have a good night. But if you come in with love and joy, like Bob, you're going to enjoy it.
So I think that your experience on stage also makes you a better tech because it's not a completely foreign thing.
And first I'm going to break in and say that John Volinas did a lot to help set the stage for me, in the sense that, or if I were a chef, John Volinas gave me all the tools and all the food that I needed to create a great dish and then let me cook. And so I would not be where I am or thought of the way I am if John Volinas hadn't laid out all of the technical aspects of things. And we've worked on mics and speakers and stuff like that, but Volinas continued to set up things and all of the like instruments I needed to play to be successful. I would not be as successful as I am if it weren't for Volinas, one, watching Volinas do shows, as well as just him having the strong foundation, because there's always things like feedback and bad EQ and things like that that will ruin a show that has nothing to do with the improv. And Volinas always set us up in a place where we got the least amount of that kind of technical issues than we would have without him.
Yeah.
And that just meant that we didn't have to worry about that stuff. And by not having to worry about that stuff constantly, it allowed us all to grow and be better techs and be better scene partners. So I wanted to just make sure he got the shout out because, yeah, without him.
And do you think you have reached the John Volinas level of reputation yet? Because for me, when I was there, John was hardly ever there because he had a job that took him away and he was touring and other things. He was still the TD. And when he showed up, everyone else had so much confidence in him that I did as well, even though I didn't have as much experience with John. But his reputation, you know, was so golden in that space that, yeah, when he was there, there was no sort of tension on stage.
I would say I have reached that level of reputation. I will never be able to reach the level of actual knowledge that he had. Plus, he actually is an amazing improviser too. Did you ever see the shows I think him and Mike did, where it was just him and Mike on stage?
No.
Oh, amazing. Everything that you think about how well I am as also an improviser on stage and relating that to tech, John is better than that. he can do scenes in ways that you're just like, this is amazing. Yeah, I mean, you already talked to Mike, but like, yeah, they had a little thing. I think sometimes they would play one half and then Amanda and Emily would do the other half or something like that. And just, it was the kind of improv that you see from like TJ, you know what I mean? Like where it's just conversational, but it's just character building and brilliant. And like, yeah, no, John was amazing at that too. Reputation wise, I think I've been with the people who are now in charge so long that, yeah, I think I have that reputation in a way, but it's all thanks to John. And honestly, I said this thing to him once and he was like, I don't remember doing that. The thing that Charlie was known for and now everybody strives to do to a point of becoming a problem with new techs is playing that song that at the end of a scene that makes some tiny little reference to the scene.
Yeah.
And I swear I saw John Valinas at the end of a scene about chess play One Night in Bangkok, which is a piece of music, a song that came from the musical Chess.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's brilliant. That's amazing. That's wonderful. And so that's what I did. And I think I said that to him like 2 years ago. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never did that. I started doing that because of you or something. And I was just like, no, that's not where this came from. And now I see it everywhere. Like my wife and I like to go see improv where we go places, but also in Chicago. And I think that we just did New York and we saw something and it was totally, they were picking up not only the like obvious, well, they mentioned a lyric or something in the scene and we play the music afterwards, but nice, fun, subtle things that I like to do. It's done all the time. Like if you listen to, at least on the podcast, of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, when they go to commercial, the song they're playing relates directly to the things that would just happen.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where if you were on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me and you were doing the section that was like the Find the True Story, you could almost say, okay, I will tell you that answer, but just tell me what track you're about to play first, because that would probably reveal what the right answer actually was. We'll get back to how it's a problem, but I love that. And the thing that I remember the most is Anna Elikio Hammersley. There was a show I played and they were doing a scene and it was in a bathroom. And so at the end of the scene, I played CCR's There's a Bad Moon on the Right, because it's a famous Mondegreen of people think the lyric is there's a bathroom on the right. And so at the end of the show, we were back in the room doing notes or just posting. And Anna was like, did you play that song because people think that it says bathroom in it? And I'm like, yes, of course. That's exactly what I did. And she was like, I just learned that was not the real lyrics to that song. And I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I want. And then I found, and I don't know if that's when this started, but anytime Anna was on stage, even if she wasn't in the scene, anytime after a scene, I could see her take a moment, listen, think about the music I was playing, figure out what the connection is, and then look up at me and be like, yeah. I loved it. I loved it because I could tell that somebody was actively paying attention. And it was just every show, at the end of every scene, she'd be like, got it. And it was amazing. That always made me happy. And honestly, that's what I like doing when those things happen, because like I'll get one person in the audience to come up at the end of the show and they're like, did you play this song because they did this? And I was like, yes. And they're like, awesome. And then they walk away. That to say though, because that's such a famous / thing that SAC I feel like is known for now, that when techs come in, they focus on that. And it becomes a problem because they're more worried about the stupid music at the end of a scene, which honestly doesn't actually matter.
Right.
Like conceptually, it's good to have music at the end of the scene, especially if it's upbeat, because it pairs well with the blackout and helps us move into the next thing and everything like that. So you want to play a piece of music at the scene, but there's no reason it has to be overly thought about.
Yeah.
And new techs kind of come in and they're like, oh, I got to do that thing that Charlie does. And then they don't listen to the scene and they don't even pay attention and they miss a blackout. And not that I've never missed those things, but they're focused on that thing. And you're like, no, that's the thing you learn last and worry about last when you have everything else down, like making sure you black out when they black out and make sure you're listening to scenes and all that kind of stuff. Which does lead me into the concept that I like to talk about in terms of, and I think it applies for musicians too, is when you have a new tech, they're always really reticent to like do anything. They're afraid. They only do the bare minimums. They'll black out and that's about it, right? But then they get a little bit of experience and they want to play, and then they play too much. And they're always doing stuff and they're throwing sound effects out. And then they get a little bit older or not older, but like they have more experience. And then it comes right back down. And then they start doing the appropriate amount of stuff. And not too much, not too little, be ready for something. But you also have to like, there's some expression like kill your gooses or something like that. If you have a really cool thing, but it's not called for on stage, you got to just let that die.
Yeah.
You got to just move on because you can't, you shouldn't be inserting something, no matter how cool it is, you shouldn't be inserting it unless it's needed for the scene.
Yeah. Another good lesson for improvisers on the stage as well.
Yes, yes. And it goes for piano players. I feel the same way. They start off, they're a little timid. Then they're like, oh, I'm doing it. And they play. And then they start playing so much that you're just like, we need moments where something else is happening. You don't need to play or that hard all the time. And then the experienced ones are like, I know when to play and I know when not to play. And knowing when not to play or when not to do something, like a lot of professions is like the ultimate of expertise kind of.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways that SAC spoiled me in terms of show is the quality of tech and the quality of text that we had, because even the novice techs are doing more than what I've experienced at some other places.
100%.
And what you all do in the booth does so much to carry the show and to give us a wave to ride. And it's really amazing. And not only was it, or is it, your ability to find the right song, but also to find the place in the song to start at the end of the scene, so that it's not just the intro to, you know, if it were I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. You would have it queued up for Meatloaf to hit that, to sing that lyric, not just the intro to the song where someone might remember that that's what it is, or whatever. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into that, but you're also present and able to do tech for the show.
There were two other concepts. I mean, one, obviously at this point, I've done the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. I have done that. But also, I think the strongest thing that I gave when I was an actor on stage was that Canadian cross, the come in, you guys are struggling. Here's something that will help you with the rest of this scene. And then I'm gone. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's exactly what the tech is coming in and doing something like that. The one I'm remembering, and this is a little bit of a boast too, but I remember Brett Walden and Gemma both were in a show together. That was the show. It was Walden's or something, you know what I mean? Because I guess Adam wasn't there that week or something like that. So they did this great long form thing where there was just two of them and they were waiting at a bus station and it was this 45-minute thing. And as that's happening, I'm in the back and I'm Googling and searching and putting together sounds of a bus coming into a terminal, the doors opening, and then the bus leaving, but with a break so I can determine when the bus leaves. And they were going around, and I'm sure they would have figured something out, but like 3/4 of the way through, it was like, okay, let's have this bus come in and stop. And they can determine whether or not the person that one of them is waiting for, or if the other person wants to leave, they can. I tried not to force them into that. Now I'm hoping that Brett doesn't come out and be like, and then Charlie came in with this sound effect, like a half an hour into the show that we were about to wrap up. But like that kind of thing, and even if it's like an annoying sound effect, like a mountain and there's an eagle or something, almost every time there's something slow going on and they don't seem to be finding an end, the improvisers on stage will take that sound effect and that's just enough of a launching point for the end of the scene. I mean, that's really what you're kind of, for sound effects, what you want, other than sound effects that are called for on stage and then just being quick with them, if you can be.
Yeah. And so would you do, if it's a mountain scene, do you throw the eagle in just as ambiance or background? What are you looking for to throw that in?
It depends on how I'm feeling that day. But for the most part, I do try to use it only as a way of, I mean, every once in a while, I'll use it to set a scene. And I know somebody I listened to, because I binged your podcast. And I know that somebody was like, sometimes I like to be able to, I think it was Jose, was like, don't do too much sound effects in the front so that way the actors can change the place. But sometimes I'll use it as an establishing thing. But what I really like using it for is a catalyst for the end of the scene, where two people have kind of come to something and they haven't done anything that will make the scene end, but they seem to have lost their way a little bit, in the same way that a Canadian cross would help. And then you play the eagle and they go, oh, look at that bird. Oh, you know what? Life is beautiful. You know, we should get married or something like that. Like just something to mix them up, just to go, shake them up for a second. And then the improvisers are good at being like, oh, I should use that as the jumping off point for something. And then usually that works. And usually that leads them to the end of a scene if they've been middling a little bit.
I feel like the urge or the impulse a lot of times for an improviser when you're on stage is to immediately comment on the thing that you hear.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's always your intent or a tech's intent when they do it. It's just like, no, let us paint the scene a little bit as well for you, just to put you in that place. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be, because if you're on a beach, you've established that you're on a beach, and then we get a little bit of waves, not big waves, but just some waves in the background, then that just puts us in that place even more. And we don't have to comment on it because that's just a thing you would hear when you're at the beach.
Well, and I think that's the difference between those two types of sound effects is I think something like an eagle screech, which actually the eagle we have is technically a different kind of bird, but my sister's a biologist and she was all like, well, actually that's like, it's not a raven or something, but like the eagle screech we all think is an eagle screech is actually not an eagle screech. They don't make that noise. Anyways, but that is an incidental noise, whereas waves would very much be a background noise, or thunder in the distance is a background noise for scene setting, but a loud thunder clap is an incidental meant to highlight that kind of thing. And there's a subtle difference between the two. And then you also do get to a point where there's a guy at UCF who was doing a lot of improv. Jeff Worth, he's a great guy, but he was setting up improv situations and trying to layer multiple soundscapes on it. And that's really cool for the like immersive stuff that he was doing. But I think that you need to know the limitations in a performance, especially a short form performance type thing, because you want a little bit of sound for maybe that. In the same way a piano player, you know what I mean? Like you don't want honky tonk in the middle of a scene that doesn't make any sense. But if you play something nice and classically underneath to score it, that works. And so I think sound effects is the same thing. You want to find that level of where you are and what performance you're doing, and that determines how much of a background you're actually putting out there and how much you're not. And especially because if you get too much background, then it does start to overcompensate for things. I know we've talked about having like video in the background before, but video would come up with the same complaint that Jose said, which is it would then lock you in.
Yeah.
And especially if you started doing video where there was something that happened. And so some longer sound effects have something happen in them. And you want to make sure that that doesn't then force that scene. If that scene always has a thunderclap at 2 minutes, then it means that sometimes it's not good and it will distract from the scene.
Yeah.
So there's a nice balance that you have to figure out. And at SAC, I think we kind of go the more minimalistic way just because it's easier to play and it doesn't complicate things. And every once in a while, there have been times on stage that you can't even hear some of the sound effects because they're all pointed to the audience. And for some reason, the monitor is out and so you don't even hear them.
Yeah. I know I've experienced it and I think I've even mentioned this probably, but some people, and I think it's what you're talking about experience when they're on the piano, and it's just like, I don't want this to be a somber scene, but you won't stop playing that dirge.
Yeah.
And I cannot overcome the piano.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
exactly.
You win in this battle all the time, so you got to give me room.
Yeah. And that I think it's one of those experience things that you just need to do it a lot and need to know the people too. Like,
Yeah.
if it's new people, you play back a little bit because you don't necessarily know. But like, when Benji talks about Chris and being like, I know exactly what Chris is going to do and I know exactly what I need to do to either compliment him or stop him from doing that because it doesn't seem like the right thing to do at the moment.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. Like that's where a lot of, I think, the positivity towards me comes from, is having played with me and me playing with you guys for so long. And in fact, that's what I'm actually coming up against at the moment, is since we've switched, I've been a little bit more hands off of SAC. And in fact, there was a period of like 4 months I didn't even do a thing because I was like, I'm busy. I've got a wife. I've got a dog. There are new people who are like raring to go and we don't have as many shows.
Yeah.
We don't have 5 shows every week like we used to. So they instantly have to learn and work on ensemble shows instead of doing Lab Rats and Gen S as prelims for their tech. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, well, I'll put in a couple of days, and if they work, they work, and if not, God be, like that's cool.
Yeah.
But now some of the players I haven't played a lot with, and I haven't really seen. And oh man, the entire tech booth is different now, and we've upgraded so many things that it's one of those things where like we were talking about, I was playing Whip It on a CD for the start of a show when I first started, and now we're using a QSys system to control the video and stuff, and we're using Dante for the speaker runs and how to send signal that way, and it's so much more technology that I'm at a place where I'm like, I do feel a little bit like I'm like, the old spot, I could fix any problem. This is back to like the actual tech part of it. I could fix any problem because I knew and I had helped build it and had lived with it for stuff. And now we have a whole bunch of stuff where I'm like, I don't even know where that's plugged in. So like, and that has rattled me a little bit because I want to be the amazing tech that I have been. And I'm afraid that like sometimes it will be like, well, this microphone's not working. And I'm like, it goes into a little black box and then we see it up here. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is a little not boomery, but like I've gotten old enough that the technology has passed and I'm like, I liked seeing all the knobs and now you don't get to see the knobs anymore.
Yeah. Is spacebar still something?
No, we don't have hotkeys anymore and haven't for a while. That was a program that only ran on like the old MacBooks that were like had a big back and they were colorful and they used to like
yes.
And then I don't remember if they were spoofing VW Beetle commercials or the opposite, but like there was a whole thing and that ran on that OS and that OS only. And we kept that thing for so long just because of that. And then we had to upgrade because we were doing stuff and all of the programs we were using like actual new age computers and OSs, and that was so old at that point. Valinas actually went through and did a pretty cool job of making his own Sound Guy program, which I think you can buy if you really want to. I don't get any kickbacks for that. But it was really cool. It's not the same because it doesn't have hotkeys. So we can't have doorbell and gunshot and all those things on it. But the thing that it does do, which is amazing, is it will play any sound effect backwards if you push a different key. And so you automatically have the forward and reverse that previously we would have had to go in and pick 10 sound effects that we use and reverse them in the old program. And now anything that gets played, you can do that. He also has made it so you can start layering sound effects if you're doing one of those things where you want more sound effects on stage kind of thing, which is really cool. And it's really awesome.
Yeah.
But it's just not as quick as the hotkeys used to be.
Yeah. That is amazing. I love that. It is such a improv theater problem. Be like, but does it play it in reverse?
Yeah.
Does it play that?
Well, and then there's on the technical side, there's all these things too. Like Charlotte is a friend of mine who was at SAC for a while, and they remember the first time they heard me play a sound effect backwards in a forward reverse, and it blew their mind. Right. And it's just one more tool in a forward reverse scene that just makes the audience go, wait, what's going on? Like, and they instantly understand, I think, what it is, because it's playing a sound in reverse is enough of a thing in the zeitgeist that like, it's not like they're like, that's the weirdest sound I've ever heard. They're like, oh, I know what's happening.
Yeah.
And because it fits so well, it's just such a fun thing to do. But again, with caution and with only if you've even played it in the first place, because you don't want to do it. But some sound effects trail off. So you have to go in and make sure that it ends abruptly. So that way it's not the opposite of what we were talking about at the end of a scene where it's like, here's the sound effect. It's right up away. And so that's just one of those extra things you have to think about when you start playing things backwards too.
And one of those things, like you said, is a tool for forward reverse. So anyone that thinks, I need to do that every time in forward reverse, no, probably not. No. Especially if you didn't play the sound effect going forward.
That is. But that being said, I've also seen people jump into scenes when it's going backwards to try to add something. So like, it's not just techs who make that mistake.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So one of the other things that I would say was the Charlie Down superpower, which speaks to another thing that Jose talked about. There's a question here too, which is this just part of Charlie? Like it's always just been part of your personality and who Charlie is? Or was this something you had to learn? Or was it some wisdom someone imparted on you? But
I'm really intrigued to see what this question is.
It seems to me, or in my recollection or in my experience, that the tech often bears the brunt of a lot of things in post that are not the tech's fault. The tech can be given a note about something that is not valid for a variety of reasons, either because it was beyond their control or because the actual underlying note isn't, why did you do that? But it's, I had an idea and I was unwilling to accept what came from the booth.
Okay.
And I'm upset about it. But there are a lot of these things that come toward the tech in post. And I've never seen you get riled or your feathers get rustled by any of that, even when I'm sitting there thinking that was not a fair note for Charlie.
Oh, interesting. I guess it's me because I don't really remember anything like that. I did once get a note from the world of tech where it's sort of like, if they notice the tech, that's almost a bad thing. Not 100%, especially when we're doing like fun things like playing pieces of music that reference something and somebody in the audience is like, oh, I really like that kind of thing. But in general, I feel like the tech world kind of goes on this thing where it's like, if somebody notices the tech, you're not doing your job right. That's not exactly what the answer to this question is, but that's the piece of advice that I definitely have. I don't even know if it's advice. That's the statement that I have heard in the past.
Yeah.
I guess it's just me because honestly, I don't remember that many times when it's stuff like that. I will respond if there's something super obviously not my fault, but something like, okay, these monitors are out and I just looked at the box and it's on fire. So that's why you didn't have that. I like to think I respond with something tangible, but then if not, then I just sort of take the note and go with it. But I'm not even conscious that that's what I've been doing. So that's really cool that that's what you're saying to me, because that feels like it's so not actually me, but apparently I'm better at SAC. You know what I mean? Like, because I am picky about stuff, and I do have that brain that when somebody gives you a note, you're just like, but what about this? What about this? So if you don't feel like that, then hey, I'll take that.
Well, and I mean, Jose talked about notes and just that learning to take notes
Yeah.
as an improviser as well. And SAC is unique in that we do give each other notes, or at least we used to in the green room post-show discussion. Not usually, hey, do this or anything like that, but usually like, hey, this is what I was feeling in that moment. What were you feeling? And that kind of thing is the way that is most meaningful for me.
Yeah.
But I just feel like sometimes the tech would come back either at intermission or at post and would immediately be hit by, you missed a blackout, or you didn't do this. And I feel like you would say, okay, or you said, thank you. And then if it was something that where there was some tension in the room, you'd be like, well, I got to go get ready for the second half, or I got to go get ready for the next show, and duck out. And nothing ever seemed to phase you in any way, which I always thought was great. Like, it was a great lesson in terms of how to take a note.
Yeah.
Be like, Charlie never gets upset or defensive about this. He'll give you a reason if there's a reason for like, yeah, I'm sorry, the monitors are out or whatever, which is great because then there's a reason for the thing. And it's not like, oh, well, Charlie's just, you know,
slacking,
trying to find the right song.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I appreciate that. And I do, especially when there's a tense moment, I will sort of slide out. And I guess that is, I mean, like there's also that unwritten tech knowledge that any note given to a tech by somebody that's not a tech, always take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And always try to mull it over in your head and see what they're actually saying. Because what they've said is probably not actually what the problem is. It's something, you know, like it's
yes. Exactly.
Or not, at least it's not 100%. You know what I mean? Like, so take the note and then just make sure you're like, okay, well, they don't know about this or this, but don't dismiss it either. Take it into things. I mean, you can try to work on blackouts and be more attentive. And there are definitely times in everybody's performance where they're just like, it's been a long day and I am literally just passing through. And that's the other interesting thing about a tech is, while we do a lot of stuff up in the booth, a lot of people are scared when they first try to tech. And I'm like, hey man, if you play a little bit of music, you don't even need to play the music, honestly. If you get the blackouts and then bring the lights back up, 80% of the audience isn't even going to know that there was a difference between this show and any other show. And so I do tell techs every once in a while, I'm like, hey man, if it's been the longest day of your life, but you still came to SAC, enjoy it and don't stress about it. Blackout when they ask for a blackout and bring it up when you want. You don't even need to set a scene unless it's like a tag team monologue. You could just have wash up and like start from there. And inevitably you start there and maybe the first two scenes are like that. But then SAC, the energy hits you and you get revitalized. And then you're like, and so by intermission, you're already like, no, I'm having more fun than I thought I would, you know, kind of thing. The great thing about the improvisers at SAC is they're so used to also performing on stage in a giant banquet hall that any kind of additional lighting you give them is always a joy. And if you just give them on and off, that's what they're base level expecting from other gigs, so they're not angry. Nobody's been like, I can't believe you didn't use red lights on the backdrop for that last scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like to tell people, and I don't even know if this answered your question, but I like to tell people like, hey man, take a breather. You know, the bare minimum is this. And if you do that the entire show, the audience is not going to even notice. And honestly, sometimes the players aren't either. You know, you're working in such a group of like 5 to 10 people are going to notice what you do anyways at the end of a show, that not having those 5 people think about it is fine.
Yeah. I think you're right for sure. Like the blackouts are key, but even what we were talking about 6 degrees, if you can't do the blackout, there are other ways you can end scenes. And again, just being spoiled at SAC, the tech is so supportive when you're on stage at SAC to have someone like, and I think you're not aware of it initially when you start, or at least I wasn't, I don't think fully aware of it when I started performing at SAC, just how kind of couched in support you are because there's a tech up there looking for opportunities to support what you're doing on stage.
Yeah.
Not to take over and not to highlight themselves, but to really support what's going on. And it really can turn a show that would have been mediocre otherwise into an amazing experience that people talk about because there are all these other elements. What you're talking about as well in terms of intermission, I felt that countless times as an improviser being like, oh, I'm not feeling it. But I know in the back of my head, once I'm there and once I'm in it, I don't think I've ever left a show feeling worse than when I got there.
100%.
I always feel better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm addicted to improv.
There's also a good lesson in what you just said, in the sense that there's also things we can do that aren't directly related to the actual scenes of an improv show. So, for instance, there are also a lot of things that a tech can do outside of scenes that helps a show as in general. And one of the things that I like to do is when we do those, we call it a tween scene. It's the host set, basically. We have audience member lights on. There's a little bit of house lights. And in some shows, there's enough noise and rowdiness in the audience that I turn off the audience lights. Until you get to a suggestion, you put it up for a suggestion and you black it out again, because the audience seems to quiet down if there's no light on them. And while most audiences are fine and understand the middle and it's fun, there are those rowdy audiences that if you just take the light out on them, they settle down a little bit. And there's lots of fun little tricks like that you can help control an audience with if that's interfering with the show. And that has nothing to do with the setting or anything like that in the show itself, but like the outside of the show that you can do stuff with.
It is amazing how much some of that psychological stuff plays in.
Yeah.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with Charlie. Come back next time to hear some more stories from the tech booth, and I'll also submit Charlie to my Proustian questionnaire. For bonus content, including some phone prov I do with Charles Fryerman, find the podcast over on Patreon. Bonus content is available to everyone. The paid tiers are just gratuities. Check the show notes for some links, and thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.